Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going up. We're going to space, into the world of space junk, and a concept that might just keep you up at night. It's called the Kessler syndrome. You guys have sent us some really interesting social media posts from Dr. Alice Gorman. You probably know her as Dr. Space Junk. She's an archaeologist and space anthropologist. She seems to know what she's talking about when it comes to space debris. So let's unpack all this together.
Yeah, she's definitely a leading voice in the field. And she's highlighting a concerning trend that she calls Kessler denialism. Basically the idea that the dangers of space junk are being downplayed.
Oh, it's interesting. That's a thought-provoking concept. But before we dive into the why behind all that, maybe we should start with the what. What exactly is the Kessler syndrome, and why should we be concerned about it?
Okay, so picture this. A chain reaction of collisions in orbit. One satellite crashes into another, creating a cloud of debris. And then that debris smashes into more satellites, creating even more debris, and so on and so on. And it just keeps going. A runaway effect, a cascade. That could ultimately render entire orbital regions unusable.
So like a domino effect.
Yeah.
But with thousands of pieces of high-speed space junk.
Exactly. And it's it's not just a sci-fi plot either. Donald Kessler, he's a NASA scientist. He first proposed this concept back in 1978, long before companies like SpaceX were even around, launching mega constellations of satellites.
Wow, 1978. That's a long time ago.
Wait.
Speaking of those mega constellations, it's pretty mind-blowing to think that as of 2023, there are over 7,000 active satellites orbiting Earth, with a significant portion of those being Starlink satellites. That's a lot of potential for collisions.
Yeah, it certainly raises the stakes. And, if you look at who's putting the most stuff up there, it's mainly the U.S., Russia, and China. So this isn't just like a national issue. This is an international one that requires global cooperation. And what's interesting is that even Donald Kessler himself believes this cascading effect has already begun.
Hold on. So you're saying the scientist who first proposed this theory believes it's already happening. That's a bit unsettling. What evidence is he basing that on?
Well, he points to the fact that collisions have already occurred, and each one adds to this growing cloud of debris. Plus, our ability to track and monitor space junk, especially the smaller pieces, has limitations. There are inherent blind spots in our systems.
So we might not even be able to fully grasp the extent of the problem.
Yeah.
Until it's too late. That's a sobering thought. Maybe we can dig into these tracking systems a little deeper. What technologies are we using, and what are the challenges we're facing?
Well, the most common method involves ground-based radar and optical telescopes. These systems can detect objects down to a certain size, but anything smaller becomes extremely difficult to track. And, even with larger objects, there are limitations. The accuracy of our tracking data degrades over time, and there are periods when objects are simply not visible from Earth.
So essentially we're dealing with a constantly shifting and evolving debris field. That we can't fully monitor. That complicates things, to say the least. But I'm also curious about the debris itself. Dr. Gorman mentioned a wide range of sizes, from tiny particles to objects as large as, wait for it, double-decker buses.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? And while those massive objects are certainly a concern, the smaller debris, those fragments between 10 centimeters and a mere millimeter, are actually posing a more constant threat.
More frequent collisions.
Yeah.
Because there are simply more of them out there.
Precisely. And this is where it gets really interesting. The number of these artificial particles now likely exceeds the number of naturally occurring particles in certain regions of space. We've essentially created a new type of orbital environment dominated by human-made debris.
Well, that's a pretty stark realization. We're basically cluttering up space with our junk. But I'm curious about the consequences of these collisions, especially when it comes to those larger objects. What happens when a satellite the size of a bus gets hit?
Well, it creates a massive amount of debris, each piece becoming a projectile, with the potential to trigger a chain reaction. And, it's important to remember that even seemingly minor collisions can have significant consequences. Even a tiny paint chip impacting at orbital speeds can disable a satellite.
So every little piece adds to the risk, and every collision makes the problem exponentially worse.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, and one that brings us back to Dr. Gorman's point about Kessler denialism. Is it possible that some parties are deliberately downplaying the risks, and if so, why?
It's a valid question. I mean, launching satellites is a costly endeavor. Acknowledging the full extent of the space junk problem could lead to stricter regulations, delays, And increased cost.
Exactly. There are clear economic and political factors at play.
Yeah.
And what's concerning is that inaction could have catastrophic consequences. Imagine losing access to vital orbits used for communication, navigation, Earth observation, even scientific research. It could set back space exploration by decades.
Yeah, it's almost a catch-22. We rely on space technology for so much, but our reliance on it is contributing to a problem that could jeopardize its very existence.
Right. It really highlights the need for a paradigm shift, a move towards more sustainable practices in space. And there's some fascinating work being done in that area. For example, some researchers are exploring the use of space-based lasers to nudge debris out of orbit.
Space lasers. That sounds straight out of a science fiction movie. How would that even work?
Well, the idea is to use a powerful ground-based laser to ablate a small amount of material from the surface of a piece of debris. This creates a tiny jet of vapor that acts like a thruster, gradually altering the object's trajectory and causing it to fall back into the Earth's atmosphere, where it would burn up.
That's incredible. It's almost like giving those pieces of junk a gentle push back home. But
what about larger objects? Would lasers be effective for those too?
for larger objects, there's been a lot of research into robotic capture mechanisms. Imagine a robotic arm that can grapple onto a defunct satellite and then either deorbit it or move it to a graveyard orbit, where it poses less of a risk.
Wow. It's amazing to think that such futuristic solutions are being actively explored. But I suppose it's not just about cleaning up the mess we've already made. It's also about preventing further clutter, right? Absolutely. We need to design satellites for end-of-life disposal, minimize the potential for collisions, and adopt stricter international guidelines for responsible space operations. One intriguing concept is the idea of self-destructing satellites. Imagine a satellite that, at the end of its mission, uses a small onboard propulsion system to deorbit itself or maneuver into a graveyard orbit.
That seems like a really smart approach. Design the solution right into the technology
from
the start. But I'm curious, what about the role of private companies like SpaceX? They're launching more satellites than anyone else. Are they doing their part to address this issue?
Well, SpaceX has made some efforts in debris mitigation, for instance. Their Starlink satellites are designed to deorbit themselves at the end of their operational life. But it's important to remember that this is a global challenge that requires a collaborative effort from all nations and organizations involved in space activities.
So placing all our hopes on a single company isn't realistic.
Exactly. And it's also crucial to understand that even with these mitigation efforts, the risk of collisions during a satellite's operational lifespan remains. There's always a chance of accidents and unintended consequences. It's a complex and interconnected environment up there. What happens in one orbit can have repercussions elsewhere.
It all circles back to the idea that we need to treat space as a shared resource, a global commons, that we need to protect for future generations.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that our actions have long-term consequences, even in the vastness of space. And this responsibility doesn't fall solely on the shoulders of governments and large corporations. Everyone has a role to play.
What can the average person do? I mean, we're not launching satellites or designing space lasers. How can we contribute to addressing this problem?
Well, awareness is key. The more people who understand the issue of space junk, the more likely we are to see public support for responsible space policies and investment in innovative solutions. Talk about it with your friends and family. Stay informed about the latest developments and consider supporting organizations dedicated to space sustainability.
It's empowering to know that. We're not powerless in the face of this challenge. Even small actions can contribute to a larger solution.
Right.
But what about those of us who look up at the night sky and see those mesmerizing streaks of light, those satellites passing overhead? How should we reconcile those awe-inspiring sights with the knowledge of the growing space junk problem?
Well, that sense of awe and wonder is exactly what we want to preserve, but it's also a reminder of the fragility of that environment. Those satellites, as fascinating as they are, represent both our ingenuity and our responsibility. And the choices we make today will determine whether future generations can continue to gaze upon those starry skies with the same sense of wonder.
It's about finding a balance between our aspirations to explore and our commitment to safeguarding the very environment that enables those explorations.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this issue of space junk, connects to so many different aspects of our world.
Absolutely. We're not just talking about like physics and engineering. This issue touches upon international relations, economics, and even ethics. It really is a microcosm of the challenges we face as a global society.
And it raises some pretty profound questions about the long-term sustainability of space exploration. If we don't address this problem, are we jeopardizing our future in space?
Yeah, it's a crucial question. I mean, we've made incredible strides in space exploration, but if we're not careful, we could end up trapped in a cage of our own making, a
Yeah.
debris field that limits our ability to venture
See, a
further.
certain irony there. We're so focused on reaching for the stars,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of what's possible,
Uh,
but at the same time, we're creating this invisible barrier that could hold us back. Yeah, it's a reminder that progress isn't always linear. We need to balance our ambitions with a sense of responsibility, a recognition that our actions have consequences, even in the vastness of space.
so, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners will ponder?
The key takeaway is that we have a choice. We can continue down a path of unsustainable practices, or we can choose to be more mindful stewards of space. We can invest in innovation, prioritize collaboration, and ensure that future generations inherit a space environment that's conducive to exploration and discovery.
But it's not about fear-mongering. It's about empowering people to be part of the solution.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we all have a stake in the future of space, and that our collective actions, no matter how small, can make a difference.
Well, I think this deep dive has given our listeners a lot to think about. It's certainly been an eye-opening conversation for me.
It has been for me too, and
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to continue exploring this topic. Stay curious, ask questions, and be part of the conversation.
Thanks for joining us today, listeners. Until next time, keep looking up. But with a newfound awareness of what's happening above our heads,